red button. Yeah. Hi, fellow teachers and classmates. I'm here at Northridge Elementary School, and I was assigned the cafe book to read for this semester. And funny thing happened about a month ago. I noticed in several of the teachers' classrooms the book on their desks and a copy of the menu on their bulletin board. And I thought, as opposed to writing some PowerPoint or long paper about this book, I thought it would be much better to come in and interview one of the teachers who is using this system in their classroom. So why don't you come in and join me, and we'll have a nice little talk with her. See you inside. Put it up there. First of all, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. You have some 30 kids in your class, and I'm sure you have a lot of things to do other than having an interview with me, so I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Absolutely.
Now, I've written out the questions so I wouldn't forget any, and so that you would have it in front of you as well, and we'll go through them point by point here. And let's just very briefly, tell me, where did you first learn about the CAFE program? And what kind of like turned you on to it?
I was sitting in on a conference with my assistant principal. She was hiring some new teachers, and she was asking them if they knew about the program. And one did, most of them didn't, but she kept bringing it up in interview after interview, so I thought, oh, I better know about this. What is this new thing? So I went home and looked it up and wrote to my principal and asked if we had the book at school, and she had the Daily 5. So I read the Daily 5, was very impressed, and so I bought the cafe.
Oh, glad to hear it, because you're not the only teacher. There must have been other teachers that heard about it as well, because I saw it on several other teachers' desks. Now let's see. When I first talked to you about this, you mentioned several words in our conversation that I thought were really very pertinent, and how you found the cafe program to be very eye-opening. And some of the words that you used in that conversation were ownership, empowerment, urgency, and daily growth. Can you talk about them and how they relate to CAFE?
Absolutely. One of the things that I found just brand new in the Daily 5 and in the CAFE was the idea of teaching the kids not just giving them ownership of their own learning, which I think has been around for a while, but is really, really important. But the urgency that you've got to grow. I tell my students you have to grow this much every day. If you grow this much every day, then it's going to pile up. And we talk often about raising the bar just a little bit at a time. I also strongly believe that students need ownership of their own growth. So the information that we get from the cafe, the children put into a portfolio that they keep, and they track their own growth. They track their fluency, they track their comprehension, they track their accuracy.
The different columns.
They track their vocabulary.
Yes.
And so it's been wonderful for them to say, oh, well, I'm great in this one, I want to work on this next.
They certainly mention that in the book, too. Several places I remember hearing about children looking at the various strategies that they're working on and how it relates to their own portfolio, as you said. Another thing that you mentioned in our conversation was you talked about student reading capabilities and how you pretty much described them before cafe and after cafe. And before cafe you would say, oh, he's reading okay, he's reading well, or he's not reading so well. Now with cafe, what has changed regarding your interpretation and analysis of a student's reading abilities?
Before I would look at a child and I would say, overall, Johnny is on grade level. Johnny is well above grade level. I might say Johnny is reading on a 2.6 or reading on an M or some measure. But it was an overall quantitative measure. Whereas with Cafe, I've broken down, my grade book is actually broken down into C, A, F, and E.
Strategies.
And I find that one child might be great at decoding words, but really doesn't understand what the story is about. Or they read the story, but they don't have the vocabulary to understand the individual words. Or they just don't have the fluency to read quickly. And all of those pieces are important to the overall goal of reading. So I actually grade them separately as C, A, F, and E, and show them in their portfolios. We draw lines of, here's the bar now. How are you doing on comprehension? How are you doing on accuracy? So we break it down.
So, next question. I'm just curious. I know in the book it says they start with 1 or 2 strategies at the beginning of the year, and they don't wait. They start right in introducing a strategy. Can you tell me what strategies you start with, and how often do you add another strategy to the board?
I started with what they suggested, which was the read to self. And also we started with picking just right books, which we ended up taking off when we filled up the board and we kind of crunched things up and said, well, we've got this, we can take this off. Or crop QV, we just condensed into one instead of separate. And I add a strategy when it comes up naturally in the lesson. If I have a guided reading group working on vowels, I might teach them to flip the sound. And so once I teach that, I put this up. Or I might have a strategy group working on
juicy words. I like
juicy
that one.
words.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna put that up. It has to do with what specifically the strategy groups or the guided reading groups are doing. And also with our focus lessons, because in Wake County we do focus lessons that are determined by the county, the order and the pacing. And so those strategies will go up here.
They'll align with whatever the focus lesson is.
It's all good reading strategies. It's just a matter of reminding the kids and integrating them. That's what's so great about the board is the kids will say, oh, well, I'm using inference, I remember, and then they'll find my anchor chart. That's up on the wall, and they'll say, oh, I remember what that means.
Works out well.
It does.
Now, we know that in a perfect world, a teacher would be able to follow the author's cafe system to a T, but you and I know that classrooms are not perfect places. You take what you know can work for you and your students and implement it to fit your teaching style, your schedule, and your curriculum. I'm asking you this because I want to know how you find the Cafe Pensive. Is it a user-friendly arrangement? Do you use it every day? Did you modify it to fit your daily needs? And what's inside your Pensive? Do you have yours?
I do. This is my Pensive. And I use the same Pensive for reading and for writing. I started out and organized it per students' names. And I put some forms in there.
You follow the form that's in the book?
I did. I took the form from the book. But then I found that it was easier for me to group those forms with whatever. Yes. But I grouped it with whatever the guided reading group or the strategy group was specifically working on. So this group right here has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 students, and they're working on flipping the sound, which is short vowels and long vowels. And then this group is a higher group, and there's 4 in there, and they're working on speed reading because while their comprehension was high, their fluency was slow. So they work with stopwatches, and they time each other and work on reading more quickly. Or they might work on echo reading or partner reading.
This looks very organized, and it looks like it's easy to follow, and you know exactly where you have to be on what day, according to date, according to strategy, and who's ever in the group.
Right.
It looks like it's not been a problem to set up.
It hasn't. What I did was I put the strategy group page from the book, and then behind that I put each of the individual students' papers. And then some days I take grades, and this is part of my grade book. And then I'll put when I'm going to meet with them again,
Yes.
what their goals are,
Yes.
what they have to put in their reader's notebook before I meet with them again.
Wow. Tell me about your conferences. How are you finding the cafe conferences? Are they student, are you very, like, is your attention, like, solely directed to that student? And do they know what they have to, when you come toward them, do they know what they're going to talk about with you during the student conference, cafe conference?
Well, I'd like to say that the whole class is behaving perfectly. When I sit down, I generally conference with them sitting in strategy groups.
Yes.
Or in guided groups. So there might be 4 kids and they're working on schema. And those 4 kids are reading while I go one by one.
Yeah.
And I speak to them individually. Yes.
Yes.
Are there times that someone's in the back of the class and misbehaving?
That's a
Of course.
messy classroom. Yes.
That's what school is.
Right.
If it was always orderly and always perfect, to
It
be
wouldn't be
honest,
school.
I think it'd be boring.
Yes.
I think that's
Yeah.
part of what,
Yeah.
what gives it its charm.
Now, do the student feels like that they have your undivided attention?
I think they do. They really enjoy when we have our conferences. We also do Reader's Response Notebook, which is part of guided reading, and they write letters to me. And a lot of times in their letters, they'll reference
Yes.
something that we talked about at our conference or something from the
A
cafe.
strategy, yes. Wow. Sounds like you could have written a book.
No, but I think that parts of it have fit very, very well
Yeah.
in my class.
You've certainly used it to your advantage. And it tells with your students, because I'm in this classroom and I see how much your students are enthused and active and involved and reading. And after all, that's the point, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's about 4 minutes to 5, and I think it's time for us to go home.
I think it is.
Listen, thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yes. I'm going to go turn off the camera.
All right.